So I'm curious what your transportation strategy is when it's pouring like this in New York. I mean, we know Nate takes cabs like a true one percenter, but...
I take the subway every single day,
How'd you
Jody.
get
In a lift.
Yeah.
In a lift. Oh, I see.
It was like not a good
Subway.
cab route.
Subway, yeah.
Subway to Express crosstown bus.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Very Simon and Garfunkel.
Yes, very. All right, let's start this show. The theme music will be playing right now. Hello, and welcome to the 538 Politics Podcast. My name is Jody Avirgan. There is plenty to discuss on today's show. Now that the midterms are behind us, we are going to use the 2018 results to talk about which states are changing and how, and what that means for politics going forward. And then we're going to do our first post-midterm Democratic primary draft. Essentially, now that we know what we know, who has the best chance of winning over the Democratic Party in 2020, which is an election year. I don't know if you know, 2020, election year. Keep that on your calendar. And as you, dear listener, may have picked up on, we are doing it all in front of a live audience here at the 92nd Street Y. In the greatest city in the world, New York City. You gotta knock off the easy applause lines early.
Cheap line.
Use it every time. Now look, this is airing on Monday afternoon. We are giving ourselves Veterans Day off, but we are taping this on Friday evening, so listeners, please forgive us for not addressing the 15 different stories that will break between the taping of this show and the airing of this show. But here to make sense of the midterms and to thrill and delight our live audience, Editor-in-Chief Nate Silver. Hello, Nate.
Hey, Jody.
Senior politics writer Claire Malone. Hello, Claire. And sickly managing editor Micah Cohen. Say some words.
I'm very sick. I apologize. Happened right when the election ended. I barely got here, so please bear with me.
This is a good indication of what priorities Micah's body had. It was like, I'm going to get you through election night, but not to the live show. But we'll get through it together. And backstage, by the way, producer and reporter Galen Druk. Give him a round of applause. So, folks, this is a live show. I'm going to give you a sense of how this works. Other than it being at night, we're going to try and make this as much like the usual taping of our show. So you'll see us working through a few different segments. There will be times when I have to stop and read an ad, which I'm sure you will be thrilled to hear. There will be times where we screw up and start some stuff over. There will be times where Galen sends me a Slack message that says, this is boring, you should move on. And then, that's like basically continuous from him. And then Galen will take all this audio, make it sound amazing, and cut a bunch of stuff out, like this, right now. He's going to cut this out. No one will hear this. Just you, audience, will hear this moment. All right. So let's at the end of the show, we'll also take some questions from all of you and have a chance to answer as well. All right, back to the script. So as I said, we're going to talk about some of the changing nature of states and some of the changing regions in this country, particularly in light of what we learned last Tuesday night. But let's just check in on where the election stands as we're recording this right now. We are still getting results. This election is not over. So we project, help me out here, Nate, Democrats to win 37 House seats and Republicans to be +2 with Senate. But what's your state of where things stand right now in terms of counting?
If you want to be very precise, I think 37 might be 1 or 1.5 low.
So
we have a lot of
just doing the quick math.
We have a lot of races in lean Democrat that I think we're being a little generous to the Republican by calling lean Democrat instead of likely Democrat. There are still 4.5 million ballots to be counted in California. Those tend to shift the margin by several points from Republicans toward Democrats. You've already seen that in some of those races, but that probably will not go well for the GOP. In Arizona, Sinema now has a 1 percentage point lead. It seems like more of the vote. We're nonpartisan, so no cheering for
results.
The audience can do whatever they want.
Can never. But she'll probably win. I do not know what's going on in Florida. I do not.
Yeah, you're not alone in that.
I tend not to think that Bill Nelson will win, but I don't know what the fuck's going on in Florida. But it might end up being GOP plus or minus 38 or 39 House, and then probably plus 2 Senate. If they somehow do lose Florida, it would go down to a plus 1, or the Mississippi runoff. But that's different. I think, for Democrats to have won probably Arizona, other states like Montana and Nevada that were declared either early Wednesday morning or late Tuesday night. When we went off air on ABC, it was, I think, 33 was our projection. Now it's 37 or 38, right? If you're trying to decide, is this a wave or not, and you're kind of on the fence before, I think we are now into wave territory.
And so to that point, Claire, we talk about this all the time. There is the results, and then there's the narrative out of those results. Does it feel like maybe because of this stop-start, because of the results are sort of trickling in, that that Democrats didn't have a chance to seize this was a definitive wave narrative?
It's unfortunate that people go to bed at midnight thinking that they want to know if they think of it kind of like Christmas, like electoral Christmas, and that everything should be, wrapped up and exciting and done for, and then the next day you move on, which is not really how it works. And I think Twitter throughout election night kind of did a disservice to people who were second screening, because counties come in at different times. The East Coast results come in first, and so people get a very skewed vision of the night, but because they're just honed in and their faces on the paper, and they're not thinking about, well, what's going to happen next. And I think even, I don't remember what time we recorded our podcast on election night, but there was still stuff that I think
12:30
that came in afterwards that was surprising and would have changed, I think, the tenor of the conversation.
There was an hour, and if you saw our model, it was reacting to this. There was an hour when things looked actually a little bit like you might have a repeat of a 2016. So what everyone watches is the states that closed at 6. So you're watching the Kentucky 6 House race in Lexington and Indiana, the Senate race there. And those were two of the worst results of the night for Democrats, where they lost Kentucky 6 by 3 or 4 points and lost Indiana by a lot, by 7 points or 8 points.
Yeah.
Then you start to watch Florida, the parts in the Eastern time zone. And Florida was probably, after Kentucky and Indiana, the next worst state for Democrats. So we designed a model. We can talk about whether that was overreacting or not, but there was legitimately a moment where kind of maybe the 3 worst results for Democrats all kind of happened to be 3 of the 4 that report first, along with Virginia.
Yeah, so. And you could feel early on in the night those results starting to affect a narrative, which is silly for that to happen that early. And then, we wrapped up the live blog at maybe 2:30. Yeah, 2:30. And before we wrapped it up, I was looking, what's the headline in the Wall Street Journal's front page, what's the headline at the Times, and almost all of them had some version of split decision, which is stupid, really. It's certainly the Republicans are going to keep the Senate, but I think people, this is a pet peeve, I've been harping on this, but people are confusing inputs and outputs, where the input was not a split decision. The sort of where the American people are at this moment is super clear. The output, sure, is split, but those are not the same thing.
But if Democrats had lost Arizona and Nevada and Montana.
I do also think that the divided government narrative is A, true, and B, people, when they think of, people don't consider, I think we've talked a lot about, during Obama's administration, the Democrats were at their lowest ebb of power if you were talking state legislature control and governorships. And people don't consider that. And so when you're talking about blue waves and, people aren't taking into consideration the national popular vote for the House, and they're not taking into consideration governorships that are won. They're just thinking about Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. It's kind of the natural way that I think most people digest the election results.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't think it was a crazy historic blue wave. It wasn't. It was a pretty normal midterm rebuke of the sitting president. I was listening to, I won't name the podcast, but I was listening to
Listen to other podcasts?
Yeah, I was listening to a left-leaning podcast, and you could kind of hear them trying to convince themselves that this was just a crazy historic look, if you're a Democrat, you should be like happy with how the night went. But some of the governor's races did not go the way they wanted to. It wasn't some historic wave like maybe we saw in 2010. It was a standard rebuke.
Solidly,
is the way I would put
it was a solidly above average wave.
Yeah, and I will just say, I think the fact, I mean, obviously Florida is still in flux, and Georgia is still in flux, but the idea that those were two governor's races that were freighted with a lot of emotional baggage for Democrats, and that they weren't, I think we were all pretty surprised by the Gillum result, if I could put words in people's mouths, maybe not you.
So let's let's move on a little bit and take a step back, because I think you're bringing us right to a good chance to sort of get some context about these results. So we saw some trends from 2016 certainly continue in this election, but we also saw some things revert to the mean, and the map ultimately didn't look all that different from what we expected. It does, however, reflect a country that is changing and dividing in many ways. But I thought we could talk a little bit about states and regions that are moving in different directions politically, and that will obviously have an impact on the electoral map going forward into 2020. So let's just begin with a big, broad question. Claire, maybe you can start here. If you think about a regional trend, what was the most significant regional trend we saw on Tuesday night?
Well, I guess the fact that the Midwest was sort of snapping back to pre-2016 proclivities. I mean, I did a talk earlier in the week with someone who said, what's up with the Midwest? They just keep on just changing their minds about things, which was interesting. But I do think, Wisconsin defeating Scott Walker was interesting. I think the fact that, I'm going to talk through there was some interesting stuff happening in the Midwest as far as reverting back to a non-Hillary Clinton Democrat, right? The one state that I thought was interesting in its split ticketness was Ohio, which
That's Claire's Ohio bias.
no, but it
is
a thing, because I think I do think Ohio might be getting redder and redder, and that Sherrod Brown, who's just been a fixture in the state for a long time, whose brand of populism has been steadfast and fits well with the Trump era, makes sense that he won in the Senate, and maybe I don't know what's going on, maybe Cordray wasn't a strong candidate, but I also find the argument compelling that there are a lot of non-college educated whites in Ohio. There's an Appalachian flavor to the state in certain parts. You've got the Northeast Ohio, which has, the Obama-Trump voter, and so it is a state that I keep on thinking about. I thought it was an interesting result on Tuesday, and I think part of it is home state interest, but I do think part of it talks to the weird shift that the Midwest is going through.
It is nice to be from the most interesting state in the union, though. How convenient. Let's get each of you to kind of riff on your regional trend, and then we'll go into specific state by state. But Micah?
Yeah, I'd accuse Claire of a Midwestern bias, but I think she's right that it was the most interesting region. I guess maybe I'd look at it a little differently. I sound ridiculous.
Sound great.
I'd look at it a little differently, and I think you've all probably heard this by now, but Democrats really won the House through the suburbs, and what was particularly interesting is that, so in 2016 you see well-educated suburbs, high-income suburbs that traditionally were Republican shift towards Democrats and shift towards Clinton. At the same time, less educated, lower income, more rural areas that traditionally were Democratic shift towards Trump. This year we saw Democrats maintain their gains in the high education, high income suburbs, and this was exemplified in the Midwest, those lower education, maybe more exurban areas snap back a little bit, to use Claire's words. So that is sort of the story of the night, and I think why sort of everything lined up to form. We're showing, so you can see most of their gains were in, people listening can't see.
And don't worry, we'll use the theater of the mind.
Well, everything is a suburb of some kind on that list, right? So.
Yeah, well, it's a kind of modern America, sorry.
I thought Dave Wasserman from the Cook Political Report has an interesting theory about I think something, this is me, don't quote me on this, but like 70% of the Democrats' wins were in districts that had Whole Foods in them.
Yeah.
I have a question about Whole Foods for later, but yes.
I actually think it is funny, but there is also something I find a little, let's step back a little bit from the horse raciness of it. There is something, we've talked a lot since 2016 about the education divide in the country, about the urban-rural divide, and I do think like the idea that Whole Foods exemplifying this like suburban monoculture, this class system, this class thing that we don't talk about very well, where I don't think a lot of Americans live next to, if you're college educated, you don't live next to someone who's not college educated. There isn't a lot of, we've talked about this a lot, there's not, people do not just mix with people who are of the same political party, but they are not mixing classes. And I think in America we don't like to talk about that a lot, that we have classes, but we do. People say, oh, the Brits have the real class problem. But like, I think the past 2 election cycles have really brought it into, to the fore that like this is a class thing. And the Whole Foods theory is flipped in some ways, but also very telling that like people with college educations eat differently than people without college educations. And I think that that's something that is, it's not, it's politics, but it's our culture, and it's something to think about.
And on the Whole Foods thing, Whole Foods does, this is true, decide where to put their stores, and one of their metrics is education level.
Yeah.
And so it's not like there's a direct connection between these 2 trends, but they're both actually kind of tied to the same thing, which is education levels and concentration of that. So Nate, real quick, regional trend laid out there. You can steal the Midwest from your 2 colleagues if you want, and then we'll get into.
I feel like this is a layup because no one's brought up Texas yet.
Okay.
Shifts in his chair.
Bring up Texas. Go for it.
Texas is not quite a swing state yet, but it's in the next in line to be a swing state, I think, finally.
And more next in line than it was on the day before Election Day? Does that question make sense?
So Beto O'Rourke beat his polls by a little bit. He was down 5 and lost by 2.5. He won by -2.
Is that convincing to you Democrats in the audience?
In the House, you actually saw like a lot of races that were not thought to be close at all, that no one was really tracking, where you saw the Democrat lose by like only 5 or 6 points. So I think you'll see Democrats target those races in 2020 and beyond. The turnout was like, was it like actually higher than presidential year turnout, or like very close to it? It's pretty crazy, because that state, when everyone votes, is a lot different than the traditional Texas electorate. So again, I'm not saying it's in a swing state category yet. I'm saying it's in that Arizona, Georgia, maybe North Carolina category, where Democrats can compete there in a good year. And in the long run, if the upper Midwest goes bye-bye for Democrats, then they'll have to find ways to actually win occasionally states like those.
So I got to take a break here. Can we hold your thought, Micah? Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. We'll come back to that, and maybe we'll jump right back into Texas and the Sun Belt. But first, I have to take a break and tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by WeWork. 50% of corporate real estate is underutilized. WeWork is 2.5 times more efficient with space than a typical office, freeing up room for new people, businesses, and jobs. Increased density and efficient use of real estate can reduce a city's carbon footprint, unlocking space in neighborhoods without requiring additional construction. With 260,000 members across nearly 300 locations in 23 countries, WeWork partners with companies of all sizes to provide the space they need, when and how they need it. Really? Flexible terms, beautiful spaces, dynamic communities, and a range of privacy and design options create the workspace that's perfect for you today and changes with you tomorrow. Visit WeWork.com to find a location near you and learn more about office space products and plans to fit your business's evolving needs. Once again, that's WeWork.com. Thank you for your patience. That will happen again later in the show. Apologies. Okay, but we're back, and let's pick it back up there on, Mike, if you want to react to what Nate was saying, and then also just a larger notion of the Sun Belt and thinking of this kind of region of states.
I was going to ask, if let's say you're a Democrat running in 2020, and you're like 1 electoral vote short, and you can run in either Ohio or Texas, that's a state you need to invest in and try to win. Which do you go for?
He's going to say Texas.
Texas.
Really?
Texas?
Ohio is like going the way of Missouri, I think. Ohio was a really bad state for Democrats, whereas even Iowa, like, bounced back in the House, although they lost the governorship there. But Ohio.
But so why did Brown win and Cordry didn't? Like I'm not. It's not.
I mean,
clear
Brown's
what's
race
going
was
on
closer
in
than you
Ohio.
would have thought too.
Yeah.
I think he only won by 7 or 8 or something.
So Claire, your state is no longer a swing state?
Well, I think it's definitely trending red. I mean, I do think Brown has been there for a long time. Brown is a populist. Like, we really can't lose sight of that. Cordray could be pretty easily tied to Elizabeth Warren, to Washington Democrats. He was running against Mike DeWine. I don't think Mike DeWine was a particularly great candidate either, but Mike DeWine is a really well-known name in the state too. So I just think it wasn't a great environment for a Democrat who wasn't Sherrod Brown.
So can I just sort of put a circle around this? Because I feel like for my entire political life, the Ohio has been the swing state, and it's been kind of like such a obsession. And we're saying that potentially now moving forward, it's solidly red and people should look elsewhere for Democratic votes?
I mean, as someone from Michigan, I've always thought Ohio was a little bit overrated.
Fair enough.
Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that's the real swing states, Jody.
No, but I do think that, I think Ohio is a state that was really affected by the 2008 financial crash. And I think, so let's go back to a lot of non-college educated white men, Trump's base. The fact that, Trump and Sanders really resonated in Ohio, I think in part because people do distrust institutions there. They distrust DC, right? So the idea of like blowing it all up in the Trumpian mold is good to them. And I think like from a cultural point of view, you see a lot of Ohio voters saying, it's just not, the Democrats aren't our bag. Now, I will also say, what if Tim Ryan, my perennial 2020 draft pick, Youngstown congressman, no, he's someone who's like, I think an avatar for the kind of Ohio Democrat who does well. But he's also got a pretty like populist background going, which, I don't know how that's gonna play going forward.
Yeah, I think that it's even a question whether you would do Ohio or Texas is amazing that we've come that far. But that we've come that far is why you should, in 4 years it
You would
could go
definitely
back.
do Arizona before Ohio.
And we should talk about why a little bit, because there is this, let's move away from, white men in Ohio to the fact that in Texas and Arizona, the thing with the Latino vote is that you're gonna get a lot of people who are second generation, third generation, who are aging into voting. So I think that's the big thing about California, Texas, Arizona, those states with the Latino population. A lot of the Latino populations of those states cannot vote right now, but they're aging into it, or they're generationally aging into voting. And I think that's why those states come on the map for Democrats.
But the map just feels, like you said, Nate, you definitely go with Arizona. The map just feels more unsettled right now than it has in a while. Or maybe it's always unsettled, but where I don't have a good read on what the swing states will necessarily be in 2020, where it probably will depend a lot on who the candidates are and what their personalities are and what they're running. Are they out? If it's Joe Biden or Tim Ryan versus Kamala Harris, then maybe you have a whole different set of swing states. Mm-hmm. But that's different. The past couple cycles, to Jody's point, you could predict pretty easily which states the race would come down to.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the Sun Belt? We've used that term a number of times. Nate, do you want to sort of take a crack at defining which states are in that? We have I don't know where this came from. It gets weirder and weirder the further you go from bottom right to top left. But nevertheless,
Who made this, Galen?
I think Galen found this on the internet. I don't know. But
What's the
nevertheless,
Jell-O thing?
Sun Belt is the one that seems reasonable
Is that
here
the thing?
to talk about.
Sun Belt is like the entire country.
Well, it's sunny down there, Micah. So referring to this slide or not, Nate, take a crack at defining what we say when we talk about the Sun Belt, what kind of voters we're talking about, and if there's a path there.
So the sun is a giant star.
Okay. Yes, okay. Let me take some notes here.
And it's hot. So
Okay.
if you have a lot of sun, then the states are hot. No, I mean, there are states in the South, both the South and like the Southwest. They tend to not have a lot of people who are there natively.
I thought you were just going to stop there. There are states in the South.
Yeah.
No, but look,
There's states people want to move to.
they have old conservative religious white people plus black and/or Hispanic and/or Asian voters in increasing numbers, plus now more people moving from the north, both old people to retire and then like tech sector workers in Texas and North Carolina and Georgia and states like that. So they're changing a lot. They have historically been states that lead to a lot of frustration for the Democrats in the same way that kind of New Jersey is frustrating for Republicans, where like it's kind of on the fringe of a swing state and maybe it isn't quite. You know, I'm still not totally sure that there's been a breakthrough per se, right? It can definitely be true that like, look, if Trump becomes really, really, really unpopular and the Democrat wins the popular vote by 7 points nationally, they'll probably win Arizona, and I would think Texas and Georgia would be toss-ups, right? If you're at the tipping point, though, where it's a 1 or 2 point race, then I'm not sure they're there yet, and I think sometimes that temptation for Democrats can, you know, it would be very fun if you're a Democrat to like paint these, I mean, they're giant states, right? To paint like these giant states a different color.
Yellow or orange.
Finger painting.
But the easiest path for a Democrat to win the White House is still by holding the upper Midwest.
Okay.
I think.
So in 2016, Democrats thought it was a breakthrough year for the Sun Belt. I mean, what did we learn from that, and do we have any indication that it will change by 2020?
Well, they did put some resources in Arizona that, looking back,
And Clinton did fine there. She lost by what, 2 or 3 points?
Yeah, she might have won Arizona in the pre-Comey universe.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
It was not that far from the tipping point.
Right.
But
No, but the 2016 election, I don't think we know yet to what extent that was an outlier and to what extent it was sort of the new normal continuation of trends we're already seeing, where if education becomes a bigger dividing line in American politics, then I think you would expect, if the main dividing lines in American politics are race and education, then I think you would expect the Sun Belt to become more competitive, right?
and she was putting resources in Arizona and Georgia specifically, if I'm remembering.
Yes. Yes.
So those were her states that she thought had give.
But there's still, to Nate's point, there's still just so many electoral college votes in the Midwest. What did you call it? The northern?
the Northern Path,
Yeah.
something is weird about that. There's like an Italian political party called the Northern League, I think. It's like bad news.
So maybe we won't use that one going forward.
Yeah.
So let's start to wrap up a little bit here, and I just want to ask. Sorry, let me reset here. So how much should Democrats focus their energy, going back to this question of suburbs versus rural parts of the country versus cities, on well-to-do suburbs? I mean, we've been talking regionally, we've been talking at the state level. Obviously that matters because that's how the Electoral College is structured. But should we really be talking about pockets of voters within those states that are being targeted? And even more specifically, should we be talking about a suburban strategy? Is that where Democrats are really going to find their voters?
The women.
Say that again?
No, I'm serious. So, yeah.
Sorry, what was that?
I said the women.
The women, yes.
I believe it's a play. Yeah, I think that if you are being a political strategist, earlier I went on a rant about class in America, but if you want to win votes, college-educated suburban populations are places where people are more likely to vote, and college-educated white women are the moving demographic of the past 2 years. So, yeah, I think you do target suburbs specifically within those states if you're a Democrat.
If I'm a Democrat, though, to me what I have to figure out is it like is a Democrat going to win a Senate race in Indiana anytime in the near future, or in?
If Joe Donnelly can't do it.
So that's the thing, is like, do you target suburbs, or do you target college-educated women, or do you target women or non-college educated women. White women, I think, split 49-49 this year, which is an improvement for Democrats over 2016. I think part of the reason they did well.
Non-college educated women.
No, just white women overall.
And non-college educated white women moved more towards the Democrats this election by a little bit.
Yes, but still voted Republican.
Still voted Republican.
So if you're the Democratic Party and you want to be a national party that competes in like the prairie states or in, look, there's always exceptions, right? Democrats just won a governor's race in Kansas. But it's still, again, it feels unsettled to me where I think you need to make gains among non-college educated women and not just college educated women to compete in some of these redder, more rural areas.
But we're writing off men.
You're acting like there's no women in the prairie, right? It is 51% of the population pretty much everywhere.
Well, but they're not winning the women in those areas.
Yeah.
There are women in the prairie, I do admit. Okay.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to jump in.
Have you read Laura Ingalls Wilder?
One last thing, and Nate, maybe I can ask you this, and this will sort of segue into our next segment. So actually, can we go back to the electoral map of 2020 that Nate whipped up? Yeah. So it just occurs to me that a lot of the states that we just rattled off and a lot of the regions that we rattled off don't match very closely with the early primary states. And I know we talk about this every election, but does it feel like there's even more of a disconnect between the primary path that a candidate has to take and then the electoral regional path that they'll have to take in order to actually win?
I think Nevada moved up, right? A little bit.
California moved up, which is
right.
Quite relevant. For Democrats, it seems to matter a little bit less than for Republicans, where for Republicans, you have this very weird thing where, like, Iowa, which has one of the most conservative electorates, and New Hampshire, which has maybe the most liberal, are back-to-back, and that, like, actually, I think, lends the GOP primary to careen all over the place a little bit more. In Iowa, the caucus electorate is traditionally activist and pretty liberal, a certain type of liberal, but liberal. New Hampshire is a little bit different. They're both very white. I think that needs to be said.
Yeah.
So South Carolina and Nevada moving up, that's part of the impetus behind that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I think the order of the states doesn't matter as much for Democrats as for Republicans, although it probably does give like a little bit of a leg up to a Midwestern candidate. You still see in Iowa that Midwesterners tend to overperform and Northeasterners overperform in New Hampshire a little bit. To some extent it's a little circular, right? It's like we are part of the media now, part of the mainstream media, like it or not.
Never. Come on. We're not
He
part of the
admits it.
media.
We are owned by ABC News. They're one of the, we're part of the mainstream media. And so it's like if we treat New Hampshire and Iowa as being really important and South Carolina and Nevada as being only marginally important, right, then you kind of shape perceptions a little bit. That's kind of how things are currently, but we'll see. We're going to talk about the Democratic primary in a moment, I guess.
This is why I brought us here, is to perfectly segue into our next segment where we are going to talk about the 2020 Democratic primary and the people who have a path to winning that. We will do that in a second, but first, let me tell you, how thrilled are you folks? But first, let me tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by Stamps.com. These days, you can get practically everything on demand, like this podcast. You can listen wherever you want, whenever it's convenient for you. Did you know that you can get postage on demand? All you need is Stamps.com. With Stamps.com, you can access all the services of the post office right from your desk, buy and print real U.S. postage for any letter or any package, all available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just click, print, mail, and you're done. You guys are at like a 9, and I need you at like a 6. Apologize. We're going to get through this together. Right now, use the code ELECTIONS for this special offer, a 4-week trial, including postage and a digital scale. Don't wait. Go to Stamps.com before you do anything else. Click on the radio microphone at the top of the homepage and type in elections. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Lightstream. The holidays are approaching and you may be thinking about how you're going to save some extra money. Well, here's a way that maybe you haven't thought of. Consolidate your high-interest credit card balances to a lower rate and save with Lightstream. Lightstream offers credit card consolidation loans from 6.14% APR with autopay. Compare that to the national average credit card interest rate of over 19% APR. National average is over 19% APR. Get a loan from $5,000 to $100,000 and you can get your money as soon as the day that you apply. Go right now to lightstream.com/538. Lightstream.com/538. Subject to credit approval. Rate includes 0.5% auto pay discount. Terms and conditions apply, and offers are subject to change without notice. Visit lightstream.com/538 for more information. Thank you.
Rowdy
That's it.
crowd.
We're done.
I think it's the acoustics.
Yeah, I think that's true.
What's that?
The acoustics are such that it feels like there's like when you guys start to, it's like we can hear everything. It's amazing.
It's like one of those zombie movies.
Yeah,
Where all of a sudden they're gonna. Yeah, we heard every one of those conversations. Okay, here we go. All right, we're back, and let's do it. It's time for our first 2020 primary draft since the midterms. We've done this a number of times on the site. We've done it once on the podcast before, but we're going to see how much our idea of which candidates Democrats will rally around has changed, particularly since the midterms. The question, we always squabble about this. So these are the parameters. You ready? The question we're trying to answer is, who is most likely to win the 2020 Democratic presidential primary? Who is most likely to win the 2020 Democratic presidential primary? When you pick your draftee, I would be very interested to hear, if that's changed from the past, and in particular, again, whether that's changed because of the election on Tuesday night. Everyone can jump in and push back and talk some shit if you want, that's fine. And the audience, you'll be able to follow along on the screen behind us. We have a nice little grid, and I think we figured out the technology to write in the names as we select them. We'll see. We're radio folks, not a.
I like the little flags in the corner.
Yeah, this is really nice. Yeah. All right, let's get that grid up. Our draft is going to be a snake draft, and Claire is going first. We've just decided. It's going to go Claire, Nate, Micah, then Micah again. We're snaking back.
Oh, actually, I'll take that.
draft.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
All right, so Claire, who is the #1 overall choice in our 2020 Democratic primary draft?
I'm
Bad
sticking-
pick.
I am sticking with my last first-round choice of Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren. Okay, there it is.
They don't like that pick.
And I'll probably ask this with every pick. Did anything on Tuesday night change this or not change it or solidify it or?
Not really. I think one of these two will probably pick Joe Biden. I don't necessarily see him.
Which one of these two?
Probably Micah.
No.
I like this.
Now I can't pick him.
I like these mind games you're playing, Claire.
I just think he's a little bit. Well, let me give you the reasons why I think Warren still remains compelling. I think probably this crowd is pretty sensitive maybe to the ad she released about her Native American heritage. I do think that was a misstep, but I continue to think she's a woman. She is a college-educated white woman. See aforementioned demographic that I was talking about. She is not, in some ways you could call her sort of like, she's almost like she was the philosopher king choice for a while. She didn't want to be in politics. She was the policy wonk. She was the law professor. She has these sort of progressive credentials while also saying, I love capitalism, right? That's her thing. She doesn't want anyone to paint her as a democratic socialist. She has a pretty good personal biography. I still think she's a solid choice.
All right. Nate Silver, your choice.
I'm trying to figure out if I should be tactical or not here, but I'm going to give you the honest pick, and I'm going to go with Joe Biden.
Joe Biden. Tactical would have been thinking that Biden is going to fall to the
That
second
Micah,
round.
having said that he wouldn't pick Biden,
Right.
get him at 5.
Okay,
right?
so and do you remember, I don't know the historical trends here, but you've been picking Biden pretty high.
Picking Biden a
pretty
lot.
consistently. So nothing from Tuesday changed that for you?
Well, look, not particularly.
I'm looking at my list for what it's worth.
Yeah, Mike is just bored and he's checking the
No,
but look,
I don't feel well, so I can't remember anything. Keep going, Nate.
I think you have a lot of candidates competing to be the new emerging brand in the party. I think you have a lot of candidates that are playing to the left and not the moderate left or the center or whatever. He is like way ahead in polls when you see them. Mm-hmm. He seems at least mildly interested in running. It seems like other candidates that are in that tier are afraid of him running and therefore being tentative, and so there are some signals there. I mean, he was the former vice president.
We know
He
this.
is very popular with.
He's like 200
with large
years
parts of the
old.
party, with African American. So the one-term pledge, dude.
The one-term pledge. Wow.
So,
Okay.
so your pick is
Who's his VP?
I'm not going to reveal a VP because that might reveal who my next choice would be.
Okay.
But Biden plus the one-term
Okay.
pledge plus some VP who is not a white dude.
Kamala
so
Harris.
in 2008 when McCain was losing by a lot, he reportedly considered
Yeah.
picking
Joe Lieberman.
Lieberman as his VP and taking a one-term pledge. And the reason they didn't do it is because they realized you're like a lame duck instantly. So I don't think that's a viable play. But good pick either way.
All right, Micah. Micah, you get 2 here.
I got
But
2
it matters which one you pick first
It doesn't
in the
though.
snake.
First round.
No, it does for psychological reasons.
Oh yeah, okay. So my first pick is going to be this guy. My first pick is going to be
Bad pick.
Kamala Harris.
Okay.
And my next pick will be Amy Klobuchar.
So, Klobuchar, I told you before this, I said I know whose stock rose the most since the last time we did this because of Tuesday night. Is that
I think
that's a reflection of Tuesday night, or is this something larger?
I mean, I think that she's a really good politician. I think you saw that in the Kavanaugh hearings. I think that whole conversation we had about the Midwest, she plays right into that. She won like 60% of the vote on Tuesday. So I actually think in one of our earlier drafts, I picked her, or someone else picked her. So that's just to say I'm not sure stocks go up that much or down based on Tuesday, but like I bet the media does cover her more as a result of Tuesday.
Yeah.
So
We're also the mainstream media now, and we're talking about her on a
I'm not
mid-tier
yeah.
politics podcast, so we will clearly raise her profiles considerably.
And then, Kamala Harris is kind of similar rationale, obviously.
Yeah.
It's like, where is there energy in the party? Who's going to get people excited? Who's less than 200 years old? You know.
My mother told me that we're ageist.
On the podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm actually very sensitive to that, but it's just like, you're running
She
a
only
campaign.
recently started listening though, so
Yeah.
she doesn't
He's
know
also,
half
I
of
mean,
it.
he is also old.
It's like it.
And it's good of your mom to be able to figure out the technology to listen to the podcast.
Oh, don't talk about my mom, Jody. Don't talk about my mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nate Silver, you're up next.
I'm going to go. So we're nearing the end of the top tier here.
We sure are. I'm looking at my list.
A member newly elevated to the top tier is Beto O'Rourke.
Oh my God. Bad pick.
Why?
No.
Why bad pick? Why not?
It worked out perfectly for him. Where he
Yeah, it's a good
didn't-
pick.
If he had won,
Oh, he's
disaster for him running
he's
for
so
president.
happy with his results.
Oh yeah, 2.5 points. Democrats have a good night overall, but not a good. It's like perfect for him, right?
Yeah, good pick.
And also, like when I was researching, I thought, okay, there are going to be like lots of stupid articles speculating about Beto running. There are actually some well-reported articles that kind of say he's being urged to run, and because there's been so much news, people have not paid attention to that, which is hard. People click on Beto stuff more than anything else, I think.
Except for at the
But he did quite respectably well. He's been a member of Congress for a long time. He raised a lot of money. I mean, you know, there are Beto yard signs in states where he's not running. So
Yeah, no, yeah.
I don't
Keep
know
those
where
up for 2020.
I don't know where I rank him in that top 5 or the top 6, but I do think if he ran, he'd be serious.
And he's not your pair with Joe Biden as a VP pick, is he? You had someone else in mind?
I mean,
No,
that would
he
be a little
wanted
bit
Harris. Or
like. No, I think
Hillary.
Biden Harris or something.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Claire, you're up.
So I think there's only a couple people left at the top tier, and I'm going to go with Kirsten Gillibrand.
Okay.
I think she has some problems, which is why I think she's gone lower in the draft. Number one, I think she's got a donor-based problem with, she got some blowback after the Al Franken stuff, specifically from, frankly, people who are Democratic donors in Franken's demographic. So I think she probably is having a little bit of problems there. But to go to just, what her electoral attractiveness is, a woman, she's a real, I wrote a piece about this and some people took it the wrong way. She's a real political animal, and I think she senses the direction of the party. I don't think I have to tell the hometown audience this, but not so long ago, Kirsten Gillibrand was quite a conservative Democrat.
Yeah.
She now wants to abolish ICE. She's just placed herself in a particular, if we're going to go back to 2015, 2016 era, talking about politics and talking about lanes and what lane people go in the primary, I would call her, she's angling for the progressive lane, and probably, again, someone who appeals to that white college woman demographic.
Claire, is there any part of you that's a little worried that your first two picks are both regionally grouped, Northeast?
Look who's in the White House. I think that maybe people would have thought it was crazy a decade ago that so many Northeastern politicians were taken so seriously, but the gravitational pull, for whatever reason, is to politicians from this region. I don't know why.
You have the next pick, Snake.
Wait, what?
Yeah, because I was
We're
first.
snaking.
I forgot about that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You just want out? You could pass, I guess.
Good. Okay.
Can't pass.
So, okay, I'm going with the last of the top tier, which is Cory Booker.
Okay. And completing your Northeast.
That's why I don't think he's going to win. Yeah. He got five
Please
people
clap.
applauded. Yeah.
I think Booker. Okay, no, but let's take Booker seriously. I think.
Jesus. If that's a laugh line.
I just started watching Game of Thrones, and there's a line that's like, anybody who has to say that you're a king is not a king. Anybody, it's like, let's take Cory Booker seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He.
That was not a sentence what I just said there.
I think a lot of, I think he has a certain kind of handle on retail politics. I think some people find it a little gooberish, but he did used to have that kind of reputation for being the people's mayor in Newark. He is, if Democrats were excited about Andrew Gillum as a black progressive who could, turn out a base of voters that came out for Barack Obama and then stayed home during Hillary Clinton's election, Cory Booker is a person who could have the potential to attract those voters. But yeah, I think he's there's something sort of ineffable about whether you like him or dislike him. So that's, I think, why he's a little bit lower down in the top tier.
I just, for some reason, continue to think in every draft you guys do, he's undervalued. I don't know. For some reason, I just think I could see him finding a lane. But
There are people who think that, but I don't really understand.
yeah, there's one on stage. And then there's people who actually know what they're talking about. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I think, look, the ability to excite and turn out black voters in a Democratic primary is invaluable. They are the base of the Democratic Party. And in a general election...
Are we sure he'd do that?
No, I'm not sure. I didn't pick him. But, my biggest... The reason I tend not to pick him is, I think you can go at him pretty hard for having ties to Wall Street. One of our writers pointed out to me that, I think it is hard if you're coming from outside the system and you're in New Jersey to not have ties to Wall Street.
Yeah, he's also going pretty hard on trying to be preemptively. I believe he's one of the people who is putting forth a universal employment program. So he's trying to to balance that out a little bit. But I agree with you that he has that kind of hanging.
Of the three people on this list that were involved in the Kavanaugh hearings, he was the least effective of the three.
That's because he came off as grandstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Nate, you're up. You have Biden so far and Beto O'Rourke so far.
Freaking pick Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders,
God.
there he is. Okay. So
you have number one pick.
You are who you are. You've consistently picked, this group, but you've often picked Bernie much earlier. I think there's been times when Bernie's been your number one overall pick. So were you just knew that he would drop, or there's something that's going on here?
Beto might be the only person on Nate's team who makes it to Election Day 20.
Oh my God! Wow.
All right, he's
Cut
this is
that
why
out
we
of the
edit the
podcast.
show, folks.
Yeah, cut that out of the podcast.
I think the Robitussin is kicking in.
I am very medicated right now.
I didn't take it that way.
Yeah.
Was the runner-up last time. He seems
noticed.
to want to run. He has a good organization.
He has a B in his name, which is clearly a trend here.
He's second or third in the polls, which is actually not great because he should probably be first, given that he was runner-up last time. It seems like Elizabeth Warren is trying to preempt his path, which is also not great for him. But that's why, despite obvious possibilities, he's the 8th pick and not the number 1 pick. But for an 8 pick, I think that's a very valuable pick.
Okay. So we're going to do one more round up here. So each of you will have 4, but we got to cruise through it. So Mikey, you're going to make 2 picks, then Nate's going to go, and then Claire's going to finish us off with her final pick. If you can even come up with this many people.
I got to look at my list.
Oh, we can't.
Yeah, I mean there are people. We're at a point now where it kind of plateaus, but I'm gonna take a risk and I'm gonna pick Andrew Gillum.
Okay. Yeah. Why not? Possible value late in the draft.
Yeah, it's late draft value. No, really good campaigner. I just don't think winning by half a point in Florida versus losing by half a point in Florida matters a lot to who governs Florida.
Yeah. I mean,
But
that's a very 538 thing to say, that winning by half a point and losing by half a point are basically the same. But to the world, one's winning and one's losing.
I agree with that. I'm just saying, if we're looking for signal of how good a politician someone is, I don't think that half a point makes much of a difference.
He's also been doing it for a while. Like people, I mean, I know there's a whole narrative about how he's an outsider, but it's like, he actually wasn't that much.
I think if you're a black candidate,
I understand from that point of view, but from an experience, like from a candidate
From a political experience, yeah.
point of view, he's,
So, Mikey,
he's
you got
no
sorry.
hand at this.
You get another pick here.
I'll go with some Midwestern white
Don't
guy.
look for us for help.
I'll go with John Hickenlooper.
Okay.
Oh,
Interesting definition of the Midwest, but yes.
The plains.
Good beer.
Yeah, anything between the coasts.
You're just trying to force Galen to write Hickenlooper.
Hickenlooper, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm looking at the online betting odds, and
Wait, hold on. Yeah. Oh, you wanna?
I want to share something interesting, which is that they have Ocasio-Cortez listed.
She can't even
Who's
run.
not yet 35 years old.
Look, the Scottish teens aren't
But we're
known for
otherwise
their
being picked
research.
right now, frankly. I mean, there's a drop-off after 9 or 10.
Yes, we've noticed. Go ahead, Nate. Yeah.
I'm going to make a pick that I kind of hate. Can I really make this pick?
Yeah, do it.
Do it.
Bloomberg.
Okay.
Oh my God.
No way. We do this.
That is actually
We
such
do
a bad
this every time. People convince
It's a
themselves that
bad
Bloomberg
pick.
can do it,
It's a
and
bad
it's not
pick.
going to
But they're
happen.
all bad picks, and of the bad picks, he has billions of dollars.
No joke, when I took a Uber after the live blog home, and the driver asked me if Bloomberg was going to run in 2020.
Yeah. So we have.
If I'm Tom Friedman,
Yeah, exactly.
I
We
like
have
that pick.
Tom Friedman.
He
in
dropped a lot of money in those House and Senate races late, and all indications are that he is serious about running. I think concerned about whether Biden would run. He is.
No. All indications
this
are
is
that he
reported
likes people
information.
saying all indications are he's serious.
No. He is serious about running.
We'll see.
I mean, it's not like that's subtle if you read the trade press. I
feel
think he's
we've
worried
been-
about
we've been
being
down
blocked
this
by.
before with
Yeah.
him several times. Claire.
Well, I'm going to make an original bad pick.
Okay.
Pete Buttigieg.
Ooh.
He is a Midwestern mayor. Therefore, he has no.
Watch Galen open a tab in Google. Come on, Galen, you can do this. What is it? Buttigieg?
I would have picked him. Can you spell it?
I believe it's Buttigieg.
Okay.
Wow.
Is that correct? Anyone know this for sure?
That looks right. Yeah, sure.
Look, I like that everyone in the last column has 2 letters in a row in their name. That's nice.
Anyway, Pete Buttigieg is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. The reason why I pick him is, one, I think he has ambitions for it. He tried to and failed in his attempt to run for DNC chair, but it was an interesting campaign. He is gay, he is an Army vet, I believe he is a former Rhodes Scholar, but also, I think kind of crucially, he doesn't have a national record. And I think, that's something that helped Trump. And I think that is an interesting thing, especially when you're talking to an electorate that is pissed with DC. Buttigieg is kind of an outsider, but also someone who has experience. He is from Indiana, which is a red state, but he's a Democrat. He's in a blue, blue spot, blue island. But yeah, I think he's like an interesting up-and-coming person.
Both research and recent history back up what Claire said about having like a fuzzy record where people can't pin you down. So Trump, or just think about Obama.
Right.
Obama didn't have a long record. It's like a huge advantage in a primary. Claire, I cannot believe you didn't pick Tim Ryan though.
I know.
You let him go.
I let him go.
One more pick?
All right. No, we're done.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank God.
Can I just to say this name out loud? It's never come up, but I just want to say it into a microphone.
Bad pick.
Yeah. Stephen Colbert.
Why?
What? Why not? Look, we're all the way at the end here.
Wait, Jody, are you just trying to start something?
A little bit, but also, why not? If we're going like really wild, why
What if
not?
we
But
had
people,
like a...
well, if we're gonna go like celebrity picks,
Sure.
I think we go.
Let's do a celebrity round.
I think we go Oprah. I think we go The Rock.
I think if Michelle Obama
not gonna
ran,
run.
she would win.
Yeah, she would win.
She would win. She's not going to run though.
What if we had like a 100-round draft for charity or something?
But I would take The Rock
the charity.
over Colbert.
Yeah, you would take The Rock over Colbert.
For
Is there
sure.
any celebrity you would take over Colbert? Not over Colbert.
No, he's clearly engaged in these issues. Look, at this point we can't laugh anybody off, right? We tried
Feels
that
like
once.
you just did.
Yeah.
And it was me. Okay. We're gonna move on. But take a mental picture of this. We will continue to do this.
Wait, who won?
Oh, who won? Yes, let's do an audience applause. Okay.
Oh, no.
So, who thinks that Claire Malone won in terms of the most viable collection of candidates? Who thinks that Nate Silver won?
What?
He
Beto.
clearly didn't. By
Who
the
would
way.
have applauded just for whoever had Bernie Sanders on their list? Okay.
No, I think it's Beto.
And who thinks? Oh, maybe Beto. Who thinks Micah Cohen won?
I think he actually.
Okay.
Oh,
All right, there we go. All right. So, folks, here's how it's gonna. This evening's gonna
Sexism,
finally
guys.
come to a close.
All the women.
We're gonna end with some questions from the audience. Thank you to all of you who have submitted your questions. We'll just have a chance to chat. But before we do that, I want to knock out the credits to get that on tape. So let's pretend for a moment that this is the end of the show. I'll tell you when to clap, and then we'll go back and do questions. And Galen's gonna edit this part out, and no one else is gonna hear it. Okay. So, all right, that brings us to the end of the show. That's a wrap. Thank you, Nate Silver.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claire Malone.
Thanks, Jody.
Micah Cohen, you are a trooper. Thanks to you.
Thank you.
And more importantly, thanks to all of you who joined us at the 92nd Street Y tonight. My name is Jody Abergan. Galen Druk is our producer. A special thanks to everyone who helped make this live show possible. Vanessa Diaz, Stephanie Roos, Jennifer Schitzman, and the whole team at the 92nd Street Y. You can get in touch by emailing us, podcasts@five38.com. You can also, of course, tweet at us with any questions or comments. If you're a fan of the show, leave us a rating in the Apple Podcast Store or just tell someone about the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon. All right. People have submitted questions. And Galen took a look, and we'll just rip through some of these. Okay. Nate. Am I really going to read this? Nate, who do you hate more, Bret Stephens or Dinesh D'Souza?
Wait, who?
Bret Stephens or Dinesh D'Souza, two people you have fought with on Twitter recently.
Nate?
I mean, I think Dinesh D'Souza is like a much more despicable person.
Okay. Thank
think-
you
I
to
think,
Michael
yeah.
from Brooklyn for getting us off to a great start. Yeah. Okay, here's a question. Should we get rid of the Electoral College? And I'll add, sort of, Micah, in a larger sense, do you think this is a question that will get asked more and more?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
To which one of those?
That it'll get asked
Both.
for.
You
Both.
know. No, I think it'll get asked more and more. I think, well, if you look back, Nate's done this analysis. If you look back, which party the Electoral College advantages swings back and forth. So the piece Nate wrote for this week, you know, if the House vote on Tuesday had been for president, I think it would have advantaged Democrats in the Electoral College, right?
It's close, yeah.
So that's just to say that this idea that the Electoral College is harming Democrats, and I think you get this question on the left nowadays. You used to get it on the right. Obama had an advantage in the Electoral College. So I'm not sure, because it swings back and forth, that you'll ever get enough of a groundswell, a sustained groundswell, to get rid of it.
Right.
I'm not sure why we need it, I guess. I'm sure there are some arguments for it, but I'd get rid of it, sure.
So we talked about this, Claire, a little bit on our podcast at the very end of election night, which is whether we thought Democrats in particular would turn to structural issues and make that a talking point. I mean, it's only been a few days. It doesn't seem like they're out there doing that, but I don't know. Do you have a sense of whether these kinds of questions are going to be asked more and more?
I think on election night we talked a lot about Democrats making voting rights and gerrymandering more central to their when they speak to their base. I think those things are more likely to be conversations that people have. I think that a lot of Democrats think it's really, I would say a lot of Democratic strategists or leadership say it's in some ways dangerous or futile to talk about things like court packing or changing the Electoral College because of the reasons that it swings back and forth. I do think there are things that people can talk about, like, do you add members of Congress? And that goes to the representation points. And those, I think, are issues that will probably become more and more salient. Yeah.
But after we talked about that, it was really late on Tuesday. I did think back. Even on Tuesday, there was a bunch of stuff passed to make it easier to vote.
Yeah.
Automatic registration.
The Florida constitutional.
Yeah, letting felons vote in Florida. So I think you'll start to see more, and you saw that stuff pass even in really red states, laws that will likely help Democrats. So that stuff is popular, and I think where it gets on the ballot, it's likely to pass.
Yeah. Nate, and people didn't write their names on this, but maybe we'll ask who asked this. But this is a good one. I've been meaning to ask this, but of the sort of last few weeks worth of news, can you point to a specific news event, maybe Kavanaugh, for instance, and say this had the biggest effect, this shifted the polls in a way that we can now see?
I mean, our forecast was very stable. You had around Labor Day, Democrats gained, and I think that may have been just a consequence of people focusing a little bit more on the election. But Kavanaugh did have an effect where in the Senate, Democrats' odds went from bad to worse at the time of that confirmation and never really recovered. Maybe it's a coincidence, but it is the one inflection point you can see on our chart of the odds where it had an effect. In the House, you had a little bit of a wobble for Democrats, and then it recovered, right? So in some sense, I think some of the punditry around Kavanaugh wound up being fairly good, which is that probably helped on net in the Senate, neutral to negative for Republicans in the House, produced a surge in the GOP enthusiasm that ultimately was also counteracted by a further surge in Democratic enthusiasm. I mean, 115 million people are estimated to have voted on Tuesday. That's an insane number. 79 million people voted in 2014, which was on the low end, but like that's very, very high.
And the turnout was on both sides, right? I mean, I think maybe that surprised people.
It has to be on both sides to be that high, right? We thought it might be 102 million or 103 million. I thought that would be very high. This kind of blew away expectations.
So do you think Kavanaugh energized Republican voters, and that's what happened, or were they always going to get energized down the stretch?
I think everyone was energized, and I think that, like, I mean, Republicans have this weird thing where they're like, they assume that if they solve the problem of how to motivate our base, they are therefore enacting effective electoral strategy, when that's like only part of the equation, right? It's also, how do you not motivate the other base? How do you engage swing voters? I don't know. I guess I've been surprised, right? I think it's noteworthy the extent to which Trump has really doubled down on some of the crazier parts of his politics since the midterms. These have been, just forget the midterms, right? These 3 days have been 3 of the crazier days, and we cover the news for a living, and I'm saying, like, that is a high threshold, right? But firing the Attorney General, having now basically alleging that, like, Florida and Arizona, Republican-controlled state, are basically, like, committing election fraud, and there are shenanigans that are allowing Democrats to come back in these states. The
personally attacking journalists,
thing, whatever you want to call it, right? But like, this is like vintage, like old Trump, where it's like, I only care about my base, I only care about my, like, winning these, like, tactical battles, and I'm not making any effort to go and be more magnanimous after you lose 38 House seats. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're used to this cycle where parties often do badly at the midterm, and the GOP loss is only a little bit worse than average. It's not as bad as Democrats in 1994, for example, or 2010. However, usually you adapt and adjust, and I think it was, Obama said, yeah, we got shellacked or whatever, and then you tone it down and kind of curb your enthusiasm for major policy initiatives, and Trump hasn't really curbed that at all.
Claire, is there enough support in the House for Pelosi to become Speaker? Not in the House, in the Senate, for Pelosi to become Speaker. Sorry.
I think it's if you're going by a whip count, it's an open question. But I think ultimately she will become Speaker. Yes, I think she probably will become Speaker.
Micah, do you have?
No, I think that's probably right. There are enough Democrats, who pledged not to support Pelosi, that if you run the numbers, she could be denied the speakership. But a lot of these Democrats won in, like, really blue districts, and it's not hard to imagine they support her or they vote present. And look, she's, like, really good at this kind of stuff. So, if I had a bet, I think I'd bet with Claire.
But this does get at a bit of a micro narrative that has emerged since Tuesday, which is like, this was not a night where super progressive Democrats powered the blue wave. That they're, you hear that out there. I'm curious whether you think that's true, that this was maybe a night where more traditional centrist Democrats had their moment.
What's the evidence for that? Just a couple high profile.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, that would be my argument. The high profile ones, and people tend to sort of emphasize those. But do you think that'll have an effect?
Pelosi's problem is also with the left of the party, so it's like it's not just centrist.
Yeah, Pelosi's in a tough position though, because it's like she has become this symbol that I think is problematic for Democrats. That's really she can't do anything about, and I think there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who would like to move on from Pelosi, who don't have any ill will towards her and think she's done a good job. But because she's become such a target, it's just she's in a tough position.
I kind of think maybe a likely scenario is they boot Steny Hoyer or something and put someone in her leadership team who's younger.
No, but it's like, it's the thing. It's like we were joking about it before, but like as Nate's team suggests, I think the Democratic Party does have this issue where most of the people running it they have all these new, younger, exciting people in the party, and they need to find places for them. you know, or I actually, I don't know what would happen if they didn't, but maybe it's not a problem, but it feels like they should find places for them.
We'll do a couple more. I like how innocently this one is phrased. But Nate, considering the results of the election this week, what do you predict is the percentage chance that Trump does not get reelected in 2020? This is basically the big question in the next 2 years, and I seriously doubt we're going to get a real answer from you, but go ahead.
I'm not going to give a number.
Yeah.
I mean, well, maybe I will.
Don't give a number.
Cut the mic.
So a naive prior is that incumbent presidents get reelected about 7 in 10. I was going to say 70%, but I guess we're now into like the
We give up.
fraction.
Yeah.
But about 7 in 10 times
14
incumbent
and
presidents
20.
get reelected. 14 and 20, 70 and 100.
30. Yeah.
So the question is like, do we have information that would lead us away from that naive prior that we think is predictive at this point, right? Right now, a president's approval rating at the midterm historically does not predict what the president's approval rating is 2 years later. So if we get halfway in the next year and Trump is still at 42% or 39% or 44, then we can maybe start to say, okay, it's not a normal incumbent. So that's not a great argument, the approval rating unto itself. Too soon for that. You know, issue number 2, you got the Mueller investigation looming over his head. That is kind of in suspended animation, but like that was getting very serious toward the end of the campaign, and that's, I would say, probably a negative for Trump.
Going out on a limb here.
But issue number 3 is like, I think he deep down believes that he can just cater to his base and do his Trump thing and be reelected, right? And so he's not going to make the normal adaptations that a candidate would to improve as a presidential candidate after you lose in the midterms, like lots and lots of presidents do, right? And like, I don't know. He won in 2016 based on facing an opponent who was about as unpopular as he was, which may not be the case this time around. It could be, but more likely than not, it won't be. He won based on the Electoral College, which could be an advantage, as we talked about on the blog this week. Or it's not a blog anymore, excuse me, on the site this week.
What?
The mainstream media
The mainstream
website.
media
It's been a
website.
blog for a while.
Anytime anyone writes about 538, if they don't like us, they always write
The
on
blog.
The blog 538. And it's like it hasn't been a blog in like 10 years.
What was my point? Oh, but like, but yeah.
Trump.
So these advantages, the Electoral College advantages can be like more ephemeral than people think. There were a lot of voters in the northern tier, Michigan or Northern Path.
Northern Path.
Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, who were undecided who broke to Trump late. In 2 of those 3 states, Hillary Clinton did not campaign a whole heck of a lot. You know, not necessarily a guarantee that that will happen again the next time around. If you were undecided and you're like, what the hell, let's give it a whirl with Trump, at least he bothered to campaign in my state, that may not indicate permanent loyalty to Trump. And also, voters in the Midwest are pretty swingy. They go back and forth quite a bit. And so, you know, so I don't know. But I guess that brings me in the vicinity of thinking it's an even money shot.
Good answer.
Any reaction to that? You too?
No.
I think most incumbent presidents are reelected, and that's the best starting assumption. And like nothing we've seen since Trump got into office. I think a lot of Democrats thought once Trump was elected that people would be like, oh, I didn't think this would actually happen. But like even the midterms, again, it wasn't a crazy ahistoric wave. It was a pretty normal wave.
There's also the Mueller investigation, which I think is a big question mark. So that's one thing that I think.
That's the big wild card, yes. Yeah.
So this, of course, is a conversation that we will continue to have over the next 2 years, and I hope that you continue to listen to the show as we do that. But this has been really fun and a really kind of nice way to wrap up the midterms and start to look forward to 2020. So thanks again for joining us. Let's go.
Thank you.